Welcome to the Arts and Antique Radio Show, where your host, nationally recognized certified appraiser Elizabeth Stewart, Santa Barbara's treasure sleuth, will help you put a value on the treasures in your own home.
Every time it rains, pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven?
So let's find out. How valuable is it?
Hello, Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. I am so happy, Richard. It's fall. I know. I grew up in the Midwest. You didn't grow up where there was fall, did you?
Well, when I was a kid, we did actually have fall in Phoenix, folks. Yes.
Well,
we had the turning of the leaves, and of course, if you went north, like up to Sedona or Flagstaff, you definitely had the turning of the leaves. But in September, as I was a kid growing up through school, when Labor Day passed and the shadows were at just the right position, the feeling I had inside of elation over it's cooler weather, and I was not a big sports fan, but I knew football season was coming up. So what we're getting now, we had 30-degree range temperatures overnight
you used to.
the last couple of nights.
Oh, in Phoenix you used to. Here.
Phoenix we used to have fall.
up on the mountain, because
and
you're up
here,
on,
up on the mountain, we've had temperatures in the 30s, and it's been fabulous.
Mm-hmm. What do the dogs think of it?
They love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
They can barely contain themselves.
Yeah.
They're so excited.
I want to introduce to our listening audience a young painter a good girlfriend of mine, Gail Eisen, who she's with us today. But Gail actually, she sends me things all the time, her own photography, and she sends me pictures that she thinks I'll like. And she's just a wonderful, wonderful woman. And she sent me a beautiful abstract oil. And I said, who the heck is this? This is C.J. Liu. And CJ is actually at the Squire Foundation's, and she's an artist in residence there. And we haven't covered the Squire Foundation really in total. And so I thought it would be an interesting time to invite Gail onto the program to talk about it. She's one of the movers and shakers there. And CJ, who is really fascinating, kind of a Renaissance artist. Looking at her bio, she's a movement person, she's a drum person, she's a sound person, and she's also a visual person. So all that works together. And CJ, where are you coming to us from?
So I'm from Malaysia, and I came to the United States for college. And after college, I actually met my husband in college. And he's actually the DJ of the art event today at the gallery. That's how I met him. He was DJing. And
what was that like? What was that evening like?
It feels settled. I feel settled, even though it was my first week in college.
First week in college, you met your husband?
I met my husband.
First week at Dartmouth.
Right.
Yeah,
I went to Dartmouth.
And what
College.
was he studying?
He's a geographer. Right now, he's in UCSB geography PhD program. So, long story short, I met him, and 7 years later, we were married for a year, and I'm here in Santa Barbara with him.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, when you met him, what I mean is when you were meeting at a party? Apparently?
Yes. It's an international theme party because there's a different orientation for international students.
Is he an international student?
Yes, he's from Kenya.
From Kenya?
Yeah.
Gail, go ahead. Tell me what you're thinking.
Gail actually met Kevin.
What's his name?
Kevin.
His name is Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Is he charming? Is he
Absolutely.
charming?
Yeah. CJ and Kevin are very dynamic, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was the first time that I had a chance to meet them at the foundation grounds at the retreat center. But
and tell me what the grounds are like, CJ.
It's breathtaking. When I first saw it, it was like, it's a retreat actually in my kind of like a home base. So it's 15 minutes from where I originally live, which is Goleta. But then when you go there, you found peace, silence. You look at the mountains, palm trees.
It's right. It's what? No, it's up. Where is it?
Off Antonio Creek Road. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a blessed area up there.
Yeah. It's a very airy property, high ceilings, big space. Yeah.
Gail, who was Morris Squire?
I learned about Morris Squire actually the first time I visited. I was there for a rehearsal of the Middle East Ensemble. Yeah, I'd like to mention that was the context of our first meeting.
Yeah.
And CJ was one of the many participants in the orchestra. They were having a rehearsal. This was just a couple of months ago. And I learned a little bit about Morris Squire during the visit, but I'm not an authority on that. I wanted to just interject. The gardens and the grounds of the foundation are really remarkable. Most people haven't had that opportunity to visit. But as you enter the property, there's quite a long walk and then down a hill to the residence itself. You pass gardens and colorful statues, sculptural pieces that are very surprising, very fanciful. And I found it to be such a place of calm. And also, you will feel a sense of respect for creativity. So the moment that I was on the property and noticed all the architectural touches and the sculptural works, I really started feeling that this could be a place where a fellow, visiting and in residency could really thrive. Felt like a place of great freedom to be creative.
But tell me a little bit about Morris. Okay.
He was a psychiatrist.
Was he a psychologist?
Not a psychiatrist. Okay.
Yeah.
And he apparently had done very well in the business world in Chicago. And he was very, very philanthropic all of his life. And the gentleman who was on the site while we were there that evening told me quite a bit of the history that Dr. Squire had experienced some post-traumatic stress syndrome at a certain time in his military career. And he decided that he would love to endow a foundation where artists from around the world could gather with the intent of building positive relationships, contributing somehow toward the universal experience of appreciating art, and I'm assuming building toward global peace and feelings of reconciliation as well.
So I'm reading here that some of the intent of the Morris Squire Foundation, bringing community access to public art education, providing resources to artists. The Artist in Residence program, which of course CJ is a member of, is to have artists make themselves available to Santa Barbara community for interactive and educational outreach. And of course I know that you gave an artist talk, CJ, and I want to ask how that was and what you talked about. Artists will be lecturing, teaching, and creating their own work inspired by the environment of Santa Barbara. And so you applied. Tell me what the application procedure was like. Take me from the beginning, CJ. So you found out about the Morris Squire Foundation. And then how did you apply? Did you have to do a portfolio or a performance piece or all of the above?
I actually had an interview with the executive director, Ashley Hollister. And the way I encountered the foundation is through the spring artist in resident. Her name is Gail Levin, and actually,
she was on this program. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she came from New York, and I went to her workshop. I think it's called Memoir Writing Workshop, and then I went to a show. So I learned more about the foundation before I, send Ashley a note along with what I wanted to do. If I were to get the residency. So I told her that I have a lot of pocket-sized sketchbooks, that I would do a lot of sketches as I travel. And so I said, my painting is so formal, I really wanted to use my informal sketchbooks to see what new works I can do from the sketches. And I talk about being a transplant in Santa Barbara, and immediately Ashley identify with it because Morris Squire sees himself as also a transplant to the Santa Barbara community. He was originally from Chicago, but he thrived here. This became his second home pretty much for many, many years. And so I think that was, then we started to talk about being a diasporan, or I don't know how you call it, but I am a Chinese Malaysian in diaspora. I live here, but I'm still participating in my own culture. And it's the word itself not just define me, but also defines what I do in my art. It's always about infusing the Western philosophy that I learned here into the Eastern Chinese ink paintings that I do, such as, introducing abstraction. It's not new, but I wanted to do it my way. People
All right,
have
I
done
want to
it.
sort of dig deeper into that, because that was some of the fascinating questions I had reading through these pages that Gail was so gracious to provide for me. Oh, Richard, we have to go to a quick break. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to define what you mean by the Western perspective versus the Eastern perspective, because that is a fascinating topic for me as an art historian.
Sure.
So I want to talk about that when we get back from the break. And I believe, Richard, Gail's brought you a soundtrack. So parts of the soundtrack are, of course, the Middle Eastern ensemble, and then CJ's performances on the drums as well, I think. Egyptian pop. So don't turn that dial. We'll be back with CJ. So this is Gail's Egyptian pop, and that's my dear girlfriend Gail Eisen, who's joining us, and she turned me on to the work of a young artist who's in residency at the Squire Foundation, CJ Liu. And CJ was talking before the break about her paintings, in which she is delving into the Eastern philosophy as well as Western philosophy of the process of creating art. And, of course, I jumped on that one, and I want to know more about that, CJ. Tell me what you conceive of as the Eastern approach first.
Well, I actually just learned this, even as a Chinese, Malaysian Chinese. Most of my art education is in the West. I did my studio art major in Dartmouth College, and I was lucky to receive an art traveling fellowship 2014, last year, to go back to Malaysia and China to learn Chinese ink painting from a master artist. So basically, I was introduced to him. His name is Dr. Chia Tian Song, and he was born in World War II, and he grew up in an era where Chinese artists actually left China due to Cultural Revolution, because they are not permitted to do anything beyond propaganda art. So they can't do ink paintings. So they would left to go to Taiwan, San Francisco, New York, brought with them a lot of scrolls and paintings, and also a lot of them ended up in Singapore. So my teacher actually studied from one of these artists, actually four of these artists in Singapore. And so he actually, you could say, got the lineage of Chinese ink painting from China. And so when he passed it down to me, it's 3 generations down. And the theme of my fellowship is called Rediscovering Images of Home. And along the way of higher education, I might or might not have taken into consideration what a breadth of culture that I came from, the Chinese tradition and the ink painting tradition. So that ink paintings are very meditative. It's years of work. It's not like you finish a body of work and you show it. It's a lot of contemplation about life, nature, and not limited to ancient texts. You can take Heart Sutra, for example, which is what I've been doing.
What is that, Heart Sutra?
So Heart Sutra is like is a, you can call it a chant, it's a sutra that it's in Buddhism. It's very famous, I think. And Tang Dynasty, this guy called Tang Sanzang, he actually translated it from Sanskrit to Chinese. So it's like 246 words. And people would regularly copy them. And so when you copy the Heart Sutra, like, you don't try to understand it in the first go. The way you copy it, the more you feel the words, and then the more you understand what it means.
You see, Richard, this is the thing, is that there's different ways of learning. And this is a different center of which the organ of learning is a different center than what we're trained, that we're leading with the brain and the mind. There's a whole different way, and it impacts in a different way, I think. This is what's so fascinating about this. Really fascinating.
Well, it goes back to what I was actually taught. I can't remember if it was biology or what have you, where they were telling me, and this was in grade school, that boys and girls learn differently. And this was, of course, just the gender difference, let alone that each individual learns differently, but that males and females learn differently. Girls usually are better in math at the younger age than boys, and boys are fidgety and energetic and so forth. And then they start normalizing them. When I got out of school, I started hearing about Ritalin. I'm going, are you kidding me? I mean, I missed Ritalin by that much, right? And yet, time and time again, with the guests that you have on here and the people that I talk with, they keep reinforcing the fact that we all learn differently in different ways.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the cultural approach to learning in this case, though, that she what CJ is saying is that when you're sitting with the Heart Sutra, you are actually not expected to understand it in one go, but it's a lifetime of understanding.
Hello.
And then how that impacts you is regards to your unconscious, right? So you're taking it from the unconscious and producing art based on that.
Yeah. So actually, in one of the verse in Heart Sutra, it's called "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not different than emptiness." And usually, you think of life, the desires in life is the forms, the emotions in life, and the things you want in life are the forms. And emptiness is when you try to clear it all out from you. Strike the balance. That's emptiness. But then when I use it in my painting, I was like, the canvas is empty. And what is the form that I wanted to put it? To make sure form is emptiness. Form is not different.
And what was your
emptiness.
solution?
My solution was I took the phrase, I took the abstract of face and
The phrase,
form
okay.
is emptiness.
Okay.
I wrote it on my canvas. And then I started to paint a figure from my sketches on top of the text. And then I leave it just like it is. I finish it with some touches of black ink to show, to ground the figure, to provide a ground for the figure. But most of the space is just blank. There's no background color or anything.
What was the figure?
The figure was a woman lying down on the floor. That woman is a dancer. I went to a Sweeney Todd dance concert, and I've been sketching the rehearsal 3 weeks in a row. And the role of the woman was Lucy, the wife of Sweeney Todd, who's a woman beggar. And Sweeney Todd didn't recognize her and actually accidentally killed her in the story. But she's a very sad character. So it was a dance of struggling. So she was rolling around the floor, and I captured her movement in my sketch, and so I brought it because it was a struggle for me to understand what is form and emptiness in life and on painting.
So you know what? Another thing that really fascinates me about the composition you're describing is that in the Western tradition, we have the tradition of great literature, and then we have the tradition of great visual art, and the two don't necessarily come together. And the little I know about appraising Chinese art is that the word and the image is often married. So the great calligraphy, for example, is usually connected with great visual images as well. And the calligraphy itself is imagery. So you have a combination that we as artists are taught here, there's words over here and there's images here, and neither the two come together. And I know in your tradition they often do. So it's very interesting that you've taken the words and then you put the figure right on top of the words.
Yeah. I think that also is my breakthrough, that I realized that when I did my studio art education, I was always concerned about colors.
Yeah.
Always about dapping the color, layering up with the oil, with the acrylic. And I forget my lines because I've always have the foundation of lines because I write Chinese. Chinese characters are inseparable with calligraphy and with Chinese ink painting. The lines come from the characters.
Yeah.
And so when I started sketching, which I've been drawing since I was 6, the lines came alive.
I want to mention something to Richard that based on, I know you'll be interested in this, based on the fact that you have a sort of metaphysical approach to the world. When you talk about the difference between form, right, so color and mass and composition, etc., and then you talk about line, right, so it's two separate worlds in art history, in art in general. But the interesting thing about line is that to draw a line is actually, if you think about it, is a series of dots, where the closer you get to the line, the less the line is actually a line. So in other words, there is really no line behind the line, right? So in itself, in forming something that's linear, it's actually formlessness, if you understand me, because the closer you get to the image of the line, the less of that line you see. You see pretty much like, for example, if you talk about copper plate etching, and you talk about etching on copper plate, well, it's a stipple effect. So it's dot, 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 dot. Likewise, if you look at the dot matrix in a photograph in a newspaper, the closer you get, the less it's an image. It really is formless, right?
Well,
so the line itself, color is not, but line is formlessness. It really is fascinating. And I know that, the ancient Chinese artists, they knew this. And it's only taken us, 20,000 years to figure this out?
Well, it makes me think of George Seurat and the way he painted. He didn't stroke lines, dot, 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 dot. And then when you pull back, you see the image that he was creating. But when you go up close, you see all those individual dots. And it's interesting. In math, when I was taking, I forget whether it was geometry or algebra or whatever, it might have been geometry. And they talked about, okay, I want you to put a point on the line. Now, and then they went into that elaborate discussion of the fact that, yes, you've put a point on the line, but that point doesn't really exist. All it is sort of a placeholder, but there is no point.
Right.
And on and on and on. To me, it's real interesting. And I have to say that when you first started talking about the lines and the colors and form, the first thing that came to my mind was cartoons, or even the cartoon page or on television. What cartoons do you see that don't have lines around them, sort of holding the color in, keeping the form?
Well, let me just comment on that. So the idea of what we, and CJ will confirm this. So academic drawing started with figure drawing, and it was drawing, so it was linear. So as we developed in the Renaissance, for example, the idea of a figure was always delineated. So there was essentially what we called in art historical terms, the black line was around the mass of the figure. Yeah. So then, of course, you have a further emphasis of that in the great cathedrals, where you're doing the stained glass with an outline of that heavy iron around the figure. Yeah. And the line and the mass and the form of the figure become one until what you're talking about, when people started breaking through that encasement of the line. Yeah. But the thing is, it's so interesting in that CJ is actually now describing that she's coming back to the line, right? So it's a re-education of coming back to the line. So after her understanding of form and mass and composition, now she's coming back to the line. The thing that encased all that before is now freeing her from that now.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It is.
Interesting.
Because the Chinese composition and ink painting, the lines is supposed to give the optical illusion of limitless. So if you draw a mountain, if we were to draw a mountain, you have to make sure that the sky feel limitless. So So you have to draw the mountains in a way that it looks smaller instead of a big mountain and still feel majestic. So if you draw, like, for example, a boat by the mountains, then you want the water to feel limitless. It flows limitless into the horizon. They never complete the painting by framing it, like say this is the perspective or this is the window or the door, there's no wall, it's the limitless.
This is a very interesting concept regarding the actual perception of the end of the image in our culture is the frame.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting insofar as CJ, I have to tell you, so I have a collector who collects calligraphic line drawings, Chinese calligraphy. And when he first started to collect, he realized that many people in the 19th century had taken the scrolls and had cut the negative space away so that it was only the image that existed for them, because they didn't understand that the huge, great expanse of negative space, the paper around it, was part of the composition.
Yes.
And it took about 100 years for us to actually say, wait a minute, let's not trim these down to frame them.
Yeah.
This is we're losing the point of this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was something that was done consistently, even with the great collectors of calligraphic arts and Japanese woodcuts. Let's cut all those margins away.
Yeah.
We don't need them because the only thing that matters is the image. Actually, it's reverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So Richard's giving us a sign we have to go to quick. What's it? Fascinating. Gail, thank you for bringing me such a delightful artist here who's really, you see, jazzed me. And I'm talking way too much, so
I knew you two would be
yes,
compatible.
exactly. Don't turn that down. We'll be back with CJ, who is Morris Squire Artist in Residence here in Santa Barbara. So we are back with C.J. Liu, who is artist in residence at the Morris Squire Foundation, brought to my attention by my great girlfriend, Gail Eisen. And Gail is a mover and shaker on the foundation there, and met C.J. at a performance. And we are talking a little bit about C.J.'s background as regard in art itself. She's a Chinese Malaysian. She's made up, the community where she grew up was made up of the Chinese, the Malay, Indian folks, and indigenous people. And interestingly enough, she ended up in Dartmouth College studying art, and then met a wonderful graduate student who is her husband now from Kenya, who is actually working on his doctorate in the geography department, I should say, at UCSB. And CJ's actually created for herself multiple homes. But also, I find it interesting, the thesis of your work at the Morris Squire Foundation is based on home on some level, is it not, CJ?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I like the word. I think it's a trend word right now. It's called glocal, global yet local. So glocal, I know. And as I break that down, it's like, how do you feel like you own this place, Santa Barbara, your community, even though you have a global view in mind? You like to travel, you like to learn from different cultures, but how do you still feel a local here? And so that's the challenge. After the fellowship, I went back to China and Malaysia to learn ink painting, and I come back here, how do I benefit the community of what I learned as a person and participate in the art community here and use it to all our benefit? And so the foundation actually gave me that opportunity to explore that. So I work with different artists. There's an Afro-Cuban group called Grupo Maferifun that I invited them over.
What are they called?
Grupo Maferifun. And they sing songs from Cuba, a lot of rumba songs, Santeria songs, and they came up and performed like 2 hours, and I was painting to their music, live painting on my Xuan paper, the Chinese paper, and so the painting I made was abstract Chinese art to Afro-Cuban rhythms, and so that's a way of Gogo. It's like another group that is inspired by Cuban culture, but they are in Santa Barbara. And then I met another group that is in Santa Barbara as well, playing traditional Indonesian, Javanese music. And it was just beautiful to find diversity and international culture in our community.
And that I think Gail is talking about the what was it? There was a Middle East group as well. Gail, is a Middle East group, music group.
That's a very important part of the context of our meeting. I've been involved. It's just a small board that helps to support the mission of the Middle East Ensemble, and you've probably heard of it, Elizabeth. The Middle East Ensemble is a university-based performance group.
I've seen them perform, yeah.
Have you? Yeah. And that group it's really a tremendous community resource.
They're quite accomplished musicians.
Yeah, they've traveled widely throughout the United States, and they've been overseas as well. They were in Egypt in 2010 at the invitation of the Egyptian government, and they also are returning. They've been invited again I think it's in the spring of 2016. But this is an amazing resource. The reason I'm very, very fond of it, besides the high caliber of the musicians and the dancers and the performers, it's a very age-integrated musical group because
right?
Scott Marcus, who's the founding director, Scott is able to draw from both the community and the university. So the age ranges are astonishing. They have one musician, I think a violinist, as young as 12 or 13, and as recently as a year ago, the oldest performer was in his 80s. So I really respect that a lot about Scott's willingness to welcome so many community members into this performance group.
It's fascinating. I'm interested to know a little bit more from CJ, the link between, now it's very interesting because I'm getting a feeling of CJ as a person who is a natural linker. So the link between music and visual imagery, and then also the link between the word and the image seems to have no boundaries in what you do. So I'm very interested to find out more about that. Richard, we have to go to a quick break. Okay. So CJ, I'd like to ask you what the concept of boundaries or negative space mean to you or don't mean to you when we get back from the break. Back with CJ and my good great girlfriend Gail Eisen. Don't turn that down.
حبيبي يا نور العين يا ساكن خيالي عاشق بقالي سنين ولا غيرك في بالي حبيبي يا نور العين يا ساكن خيالي.
Welcome back to the Art and Antiques Radio Show, and I wanted to actually save about 8 minutes at the end of the program to talk about the other side of my girlfriend Gail Eisen, who's actually an instructor, Dr. Eisen, I should say, teacher, editor, curriculum specialist, and she's actually doing, she's actually amazing gerontologist. What is that? Well, we won't say gerontologist. She'll talk about Finding Words to Honor a Life, Exploring Grief, Loss, and Creative Coping. And this is actually an experience, a class, as well as an experience, talking about loss and creative coping. That's going to be held on Schott campus. She's taught at UCLA, University of Michigan, Cal State University, taught in Kenya, Bulgaria, Egypt, Israel, India, et cetera, et cetera. But what I go to her for is talking about cross-generational issues. So throughout the ages of a person's life, the things that surface as things of meaning, and this is sort of involved with the concept of loss, the topic of Gail's new lecture. And I want to save a little bit time at the end to talk about, I realized I didn't introduce Gail properly. And Gail, I apologize. So this is why Gail's here, as well as the fact she has turned me on to CJ. Question, CJ, this idea of negative space, I want to hold that thought because Richard's just told us we have a phone call coming in.
Yes, we do.
Oh, there you are.
I
Hello.
am here the whole time. Well, I better be quick because you've got to give 8 minutes over to your best girlfriend.
That's right.
I must say thank you, CJ, for mentioning Santeria, the Cuban group that does its music, and I didn't know that there was a music associated with Santeria.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for educating me by bringing those two concepts together, the music and Santeria.
Yeah, and to add to that, the Santeria music for me is very visual because the different orishas or spirits that they sing to have colors represented for them. So during this performance, when I did a live painting of it, I subconsciously chose the brown, the blue, the black, and the white to paint my abstract painting, and ended up finding the Orisha Obalua, which is the healing and disease Orisha that is synchronized to Saint Lazarus in
the Catholic faith, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And not Babalu.
Babalu, yes, sorry. Babalu, yeah.
Okay.
So I recommend to you, Richard, the work of a dance ethnographer, Maya Darren, who in the 40s was studying the dance of the Santeria and the music, because the whole two with the visual artists go together. So she actually was a brilliant filmmaker. So look at the work of Maya Darren, and you'll see really graphically the connection between the dance, the visual movement, which is actually spatial geometry, really, when you think about dance, right?
Uh-huh.
And the Santeria and the faith-based movements and faith-based colors. So Maya Darren is a good person to add to your library there on that. But thank you for the call.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
So, very quickly, I want to hear really quickly from CJ about this concept of negative space, what it means to you, CJ.
So you can't think of the negative space without the positive. So I would use the concept of yin and yang. And yin and yang is about dualities. It's about dualities present in our natural environment, rising and descending energy, movement and stillness, heaven and earth, constant change and steady passing of time in our lives. As one of the things I came up with when I show my work, because it's a constant balancing act when I started the painting. It's very spontaneous. It has to finish in one go. I started with a gestural movement. And from that gestural movement, the space have to interact with my movement.
Right.
And so when I continue to paint, adding lines, adding dots, adding words, the space have to make sense to complete each other. So sometimes the black is the negative space. The white, the blank space is actually positive. And sometimes the gray area is the negative space for the black and the colors. So they have to take turns. They are not just the blank space.
With this now, Rich, do we have to go to break one more time before? Okay, let's go to break now because this is a perfect segue to talk about Gail's class that I want to actually ask her about, because what CJ is saying is that part of what she's studying in the idea, the philosophy of the yin-yang basis is change and time in our lives. And that's a little bit of something that Gail's an expert on. So let's go to quick break now so Gail can have a couple of minutes to talk about what she does best. Welcome back to the Art and Antique Radio program. I just want to give a shout out. So if it is November 6th tonight, if it is, and you're listening on the Friday morning segment of this program, CJ has an art opening tonight called An African Dance Party, Painting Movements with CJ Liu. It's at A Knee Gallery, which is 216 State Street. And it's her husband, DJ Bixton, is actually DJing the party. It's from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. It's a do not miss, so that is going to be an exciting time, I'm sure, for both of you, CJ. Okay, I want to talk to Dr. Eisen, Finding Words to Honor a Life, Experiencing Grief, Loss, and Creative Coping. Tell us a little bit about that class, Gail.
Well, this is a class that's now in its third year. We've been offering it through SBCC's Center for Lifelong Learning. And it's a class that's one of many modules that I've developed in the area of lifespan psychology or adult development. So this is just one theme of so many transitions or stages or turning points that people experience from the time of their birth all the way through childhood and adolescence and young adulthood and midlife, retirement, advanced years, and then the older ages where oftentimes we're surviving a loss. So this particular class was developed for students of all ages because even a 15 or 18-year-old can lose a close relative
Definitely.
or a deep friendship can be lost. So it's open to students of all ages, and it's through the Center for Lifelong Learning. And it's addressing this universal that all people will experience, loss and bereavement, if they live long enough. And the coverage is really comprehensive. I have about 20 or 25 topics. They're all very practical, but also somehow very poignant. So in this season, it's offered December the 5th. That'll be our next class. And it's a half-day workshop. It's actually fairly lengthy. It's almost 6 hours. But we're talking about anniversary reactions, which are very pertinent during the time of the holidays and the New Year, when the wider culture is celebrating and people who've just endured a loss are in a very different place. Also, we spend some time talking about the role of culture in shaping our attitudes toward loss, because in the United States, there has been a tremendous emphasis on optimism and stoicism and recovery, or rapid recovery from things that might feel sad. So many people who are just beginning to feel bereft or in the deep throes of a despair, many people face that, they're having a hard time because in the public sphere, Americans are not freely allowed to voice those kinds of emotions. Of course, the family is a refuge for that. But when people's families are small or geographic mobility...
Or stoic, it's themselves.
Yes, it could be themselves, depending on the ethnic group. In ethnic America, there are avenues for lots of verbal, emotive experiences. By the way, one of the things we talk about would be the importance of expressing feelings and emotions. One of the most critical factors in trying to heal and recover is expressing emotions freely and remembering the legacy of the loved one.
Tell us one more time, the class is to be held...
It is December the 5th, and this particular class will be at the Schott campus. It's on Padre Street.
10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., and this is a seminar exploring topics of loss and creative coping. I personally tell you that this will change your ideas about how you think about grief. And Dr. Eisen she's at the top of her form with this. This is absolutely fantastic. Another shout out, which is tonight at the Aine Gallery, 216 State Street, African Dance Party with DJ Bixton, and Painting Moments by our artist of the week here, CJ Liu, a fellow at the Morris Squire Foundation. And what a fantastic opportunity it's been to talk with you, CJ. Gail, you're remarkable. Thank you for bringing me, CJ.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to see you again.